Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Zenaton, and today I'm going to be bringing you a video that I've been meaning to do for a while now, ever since the new set released. I've had things in real life that I've been doing, so this is coming out a little bit later than I would like, but you know what they say, better late than never. Today I'm going to be going through every single new card that has been released in Rising Tides. I'm breaking this up into two separate videos. The first video, which we're watching right now, is going to be going through just the new region, which is Bilgewater. The second video, which I'll upload probably tomorrow, will be going through every other single region. I'm going to be doing it like this because honestly there's a lot of cards. I believe over under 20. If I made it one video, it'd be around probably 2 hours or so. So before we get into the ratings, I just have a few things to say. If you're new to this type of video and you haven't watched my previous rating videos, quick summary. It's like any other rating videos, rating, critique, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to be using the 5-star rating system, fairly simple. 0 stars being absolute trash, probably shouldn't play the card. 5 stars being pretty much, wow, this is a great card, you should probably be playing this card, it's like a meta-defining card maybe. So yeah, I will pretty much go through and try to give some commentary on each and every single new card, even if I don't think it's constructed playable, and I'll give commentary as to why I don't think it's good enough, and maybe there might be a deck in the future that I can see play in or something. So let's go and look at this. We got a little infograph here real quick. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff in this set. It's not as big as the first set, the set that Runeterra started with, only 120 cards, and I can't remember exactly how many cards were in the initial set, but I think it was over 600 because it was the first set, so, you know, they had to put out a lot of cards. The way, as you can see here, if you can get a really quick overview of all the new keywords they also introduced. I will go into a deeper explanation of all of them as I see them. And that's gonna pretty much be it. I don't really want to talk too much about anything else besides the cards, like the guardians, the cosmetics in general. That's not for this video. Maybe I'll make a video in the future talking about cosmetics or guardians or whatever. Also, another quick note, this is purely for constructed. Maybe I'll mention a card and how good it does in expedition, but the ratings are going to be purely for constructed. A card might be insanely good in expedition, but I will say it's terrible and maybe like 0 or 1 stars because it's just not constructed playable. Again, these are going to be my personal opinions. Don't take them as gospel. Just because I say a card that you love is like 0 or 1 stars, don't think what I say means you shouldn't play the card. And just because I say a card is 5 stars, don't think that you should play it. And I am even correct. I could be wrong. There are times where I have, in my previous rating videos, just missed the mark completely and said a card is just trash and unplayable, and it turns out it's actually playable. So, enough of my rambling. Let's get into the rating. We have quite a few cards, I believe. Since we're going to go through Bilgewater first, I believe there's a little over 60 cards in Bilgewater. Lots of really good cards, too. First up, though, we're going to be looking at Abyssal Eye. Abyssal Eye is also... he's got a couple of things with him. He's got, first off, he's the part of the sea monster group. There is quite a bit of sea monster synergy. This guy is pretty good with sea monsters. He also has one of the new mechanics called Deep. If you weren't watching the video when I had the infograph up, Deep basically says if there are 15 or less cards in your deck, then you become Deep, and any card that has Deep or says Deep gets +3/+3. Unless, obviously, they say something different like Nautilus. So, this card is what? A 5-mana, 3/3 elusive Deep. So, it'll become a 6/6 when you're Deep. And he says, Nexus Strike, draw a card. I like this card. Now, granted, I'm a control player. I like drawing cards. So, if a card says, draw a card, I'm already interested. In all honesty, though, even though I'm a little biased with this card, I actually don't think he's that good. I feel like you're only going to play this card in a sea monster / deep deck, and even then I've seen some people cutting him, myself included, when I'm trying to make sea monsters work. With that said, though, I still think if you're playing sea monsters, you probably want to play this card because it's just good. It can block elusives, so it's some kind of defense against elusives. And if your opponent doesn't answer it, you'll just start to win from card advantage, because even if you're not deep, by drawing a card every turn, or at least with every strike that he's doing, you're getting closer to deep. And obviously you can do some combat tricks by getting deep at burst speed and so on and so forth. So that's pretty cute that you can do as well. So with all that, I'm only going to give this guy 3 stars. Not 4 stars though, because he's a little small for the cost. And if you're not deep, he's kind of easy to kill. So only 3 stars for now. And he is kind of slow, like a 5-mana 3/3 on turn 5 when you could play like 5-mana 5/5s in other regions and just kill your opponent, while a 5-mana 3/3 is not really doing too much. So just 3 stars. He's solid, he'll do his job, but he might get cut in the right meta. Next up though, we got Black Market Merchant. 2-mana 2/2. When you draw an enemy card, reduce its cost by 1. Plunder, draw 1 from the enemy deck. Plunder specifically says if you have damaged the enemy nexus, plunder. And basically do whatever the plunder thing is. There are various types of plunder things. This guy basically says if you hit your opponent's face, draw a card from their deck. The top card. There are a lot of steel cards in Bilgewater. We're going to eventually see a 2-mana burst spell that says basically draw the top card of your opponent's deck, and if you plunder, draw 2. That card's great, by the way. I don't know about this guy, though. The issue is I don't think this guy really comes down on turn 2 too often. So I don't like to look at this guy as a 2-mana drop. I think this card is powerful, don't get me wrong, because in Legends of Runeterra at the moment, I'd say most cards are individually strong, and most decks are just playing cards that are individually strong. Sure, there are some decks that are a little more synergy based, like say deep decks as well, to use a new deck, and Ezreal decks as well. But still, even those decks still run cards that are just individually good, like Mystic Shots, Get Excited, Denies, so on and so forth. And anyone who's played other card games where you could steal or get your card stolen knows just how annoying having your cards get stolen is, so have fun playing against this guy. I don't think he's that good though, but I think he is definitely constructed playable. He's not going to be too, like, he's annoying, but I don't think he's too powerful, so I'm going to give him 2 stars. You'll play him, put 3 of him in your Bilgewater decks, but I could see cutting him for just better cards, because he's a little slow and he doesn't really do much on the board as well. So like you also always have to activate Plunder, or else it just feels bad to play this card. Who knows though? Maybe more and more steel cards will be printed, and then just the cost reduction will be enough alone that you'll want to play this card without having to plunder. Maybe, but yeah, I don't think so. Next up though, we got Brash Gambler. 4 mana, 4/5. To play her, discard 2, attack, draw 2, fleeting. If you don't remember, fleeting basically says at the end of the turn, discard this card. So when you attack with her, she'll draw 2 cards from your deck, and if you haven't played those cards at the end of your turn, you have to discard them. That's pretty good. Like, 4 mana 4/5 is already almost playable on its own, as we've seen from the Elnuck. Now granted, the 4/5 Elnuck was playable because of his other Elnuck friends, but still, I think this card is powerful. The only problem is I think this is a case of a card being powerful that just doesn't have a home. I feel like if she can find a home, she's going to be a huge source of card advantage and pressure at the same time. She's going to just be going, she comes down, discard some fodder like, I don't know, puff caps or something from your deck, or from your hand, sorry. Maybe even discard fleeting cards that you've drawn from other cards. And then she just keeps attacking in, putting pressure in, refilling your hand to give you even more pressure to put on the board, and just pushing your opponent in. Again, though, the issue is I don't think a deck is really around that wants her at the moment, because there's other 4-drops that are, while not as beefy as her, just as powerful, if not more powerful overall. Still though, because of the potential alone for her, I really, really like her and I really think she's powerful. I'm gonna give her 3 stars because I really do think she will see some play. I haven't seen her too much recently because I don't think, like I said, anyone's found a good deck for her, a good home for her. But I do think she will have her time in the sun and will make some small constructed appearance. Next up though, who have we got? Oh boy, we got the thick boy. We got the Bubble Bear. 3 mana, 0/6, elusive, and attune. If you don't know what attune is, because you weren't looking at the infograph, attune basically says when you play this card, refill 1 spell mana. And obviously, if you have 3 spell mana, it doesn't do anything. I have no idea what to do with this guy. I really, really don't. I've thought, like, maybe if you're playing, like, Freljord and you want more copies of Braum, maybe? But the problem is this guy doesn't have Challenger or Regeneration like Braum. So, yeah, I really just don't know. Like, a wall, maybe? Like, to block Shadow Assassin and buy some time, but I feel like there's just better stuff you could be doing if you wanted to do some anti-aggro stuff. I really feel like this card is useless. Even in Expedition, I think no one wants to play this card in Expedition. I think it's going to... The only way this card will see play in Constructed is in the future if some kind of card comes out that's like a Inner Fire, Divine Spirit kind of analog from Hearthstone, where it's like, okay, your power is equal to your health, so this thing becomes a 3 mana 6/6 for 2 cards, and then like maybe double it to make it a 0/12, and then make it a 12/12, and then swing in as an elusive with 12/12. Problem is, in Runeterra, unlike Hearthstone, we have things called fast spells and burst spells, so even if you do all that, it's like, okay, that was cool. I kill it with vengeance. So yeah, because of all that, you can probably guess what I'm going to give this as a rating. I feel like not too many people would argue with the rating of this guy. 0 stars. I just don't see any kind of deck that would want this card. Now, he is a cute, thick boy, though. I'll give him that, but I'm sorry. Protect the Bubble Bear, but stay away from my decks. Next up, we got Chum the Waters. 4 mana slow spell, grant an enemy vulnerable, and summon Longtooth. Longtooth is a 4 mana 5/1 Overwhelm. Vulnerable is sort of like Reverse Challenger, if you don't know what Vulnerable is. Basically, an enemy unit that has Vulnerable can be challenged by literally any of your units. So the play here obviously is you put Vulnerable on something small like a 1/1 and then, or a 1/5 or whatever you want to kill, and then Longtooth basically hooks them in, and Longtooth will probably trade because he's a 5/1 and kill them, and some overwhelm damage will be done. The issue is that's not that good for 4 mana. Now, granted, the vulnerable will last forever, just in case your opponent has like a Vile Feast or a Withering Wail for Longtooth. So it's like, even if they killed Longtooth, you still got some value in that you can use something else you have. Like, I don't know, maybe you got a Abyssal Eye or something, and then you can use Abyssal Eye to kill the thing that has vulnerable. So I don't think it's good. 4 mana for basically, the way I like to look at it is it's a 4 mana 5/1 Overwhelm that says when you summon this card, give something vulnerable. I don't think that's good enough. Granted, it's a spell, so spells matter decks might want it, but even then it's a little iffy because it's a slow spell and can't really do anything cute with like a Fizz, who we'll see later on with fast spells. So I'm not too high up on this card. I think it fits into some decks though that are a little removal light and might want a little more removal, so they'll play Chum the Waters, but you're not going to be happy playing this card, I think. I'll give it 2 stars. I think it's fine. It's passable and serviceable enough for Constructed, but you're probably only going to play like 1 or 2 of them, and at that point, it's like, hopefully your other region has other removal you can play instead of Chum the Waters. Next up, we got... oh boy, we got a guy who I have not been liking. I haven't been liking him because he's been beating me up. Citrus Courier. 6 mana, 4/5, plunder, heal allies and your Nexus by 3, then rally. Oh boy. Yeah, this guy is pretty good. So 6 mana 4/5, that's obviously bad, like bad stats for the cost. Like you can pay 4 mana for 4/5. So is the whole plunder to heal your allies and your nexus by 3 and then rally worth 2 mana? Yes. Yes, it is. The kind of deck that's playing Citrus Courier is definitely going to be a mid-rangey deck that's going to be attacking in. They're going to be getting in damage, like at least like 1 or 2 damage here and there, if not like big chunks of damage, like 7 or 8 damage per turn. And then your opponent just drops Citrus Courier, and you're like, oh, okay, like I'll block. You'll be like, okay, I'll block like this, this, and this, and I'll let like a 1/1 or a 2/2 through. Because you either just don't have enough blocks, or you don't have a favorable block for that 1/1 or 2/2. You let that damage through, and you're like, okay, looks good. Time to survive and counterattack or develop my board or whatever. And then your opponent just goes like, okay, here's Citrus Courier, heal up all the damaged boys, and then crack back again. And you're like, well, guess I'll die. I think this guy is great. I don't think he's too overpowered, but he is very annoying to play against. And if you like to play something like Scouts or Demacia, you might want to look at Bilgewater for this guy alone. For that, 4 stars. Really, really good card. The issue is sometimes you don't want the body. Sometimes you'd rather just play Relentless Pursuit instead if you want a rally effect. So that's kind of why I'm only giving him 4 stars. He's still really, really good, though. Honestly, I could easily be convinced to put him up to 5 stars. I just think he's just barely not good enough for 5 stars. Again, we don't use half stars here. So only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I kind of felt like this could be a guy who could get up to 4.5 stars. But again, no half stars here. Next up, who have we got? We got the Coral Creatures. 2 mana, 1/2, attune. When I'm summoned, create a random 1-cost spell in hand. Most 1-cost spells are pretty decent. You got a lot of combat tricks. You got just decent stuff in general. And plus the attune lets you play the spell anyway, right away, even if you played something on turn 1. This card is fine. I think this card is mostly going to be filler in most decks. In spell-based decks, like a Lee Sin deck, or maybe an Ezreal deck, or some Ionia stuff in general. It does give you more spells, but it's just a 1-cost spell. I still like the card. I feel like he's solid filler. And he comes down, sometimes you'll get a really, really good 1-mana spell. And he'll block and try his best to slow down aggro. His body's not the greatest, but it basically comes down to like how much can you use the random 1-mana spell. And I'll be honest with you, I think because of the randomness and most 1-mana spells are just not that high impact, I don't think he's that good, but I think he's good enough for Constructed. He's going to get 3 stars from me. Solid curve filler. Gives you some value. He's kind of like a 2-mana 1/2 draw card. Refills spell mana. Sure, the card you draw is not from your deck, and it's technically just a 1-cost spell, and because of the randomness, you could get a spell that basically is trash, but in general, I think most 1-cost spells are pretty good. Next up, though, we got Crackshot Corsair. 1 mana 1/1. When allies attack, deal 1 to the enemy nexus. First off, extremely cute card. Sadly, I don't think she's that good of a card. I feel like she does have a home, though. She does allow you to easily activate Plunder every turn. She doesn't have to attack in herself to have her ability go off. She can just sit on the bench and have everyone else attack, and she'll just be sitting at the bench, basically taking a cheap shot. However, is that good enough? The issue I see with the card is that sounds really good if you were able to play her on turn 1. The problem I see arising is, what if it gets to the late game and you're like, okay, I really need some gas here, I really need a good card, and you draw this card. This just isn't a high impact card, unlike some other 1-drops and 2-drops that are, while you still don't want to draw them in the late game, they're still okay to draw in the late game, like Hapless Aristocrat or something. Because of that, I'm only going to give her 1 star. I feel like she has a very, very niche home in some kind of like really heavy plunder-based decks, but even then, I don't really like her in those decks. So sadly, 1 star. Still really cute. Next up, though, we got Another sea monster, and a card I love, but also a card I don't think is too good. We got Devourer of the Depths. 6 mana, 4/4 deep, so it becomes a 7/7 when you're deep. When you play this card, obliterate an enemy with less health than this guy. This is a play ability, so you do get a priority window to respond by casting your own spells. You can counter it with Deny. And the thing is, if you play a spell that either just removes the guy in general, like a Vengeance or Will of Ionia, or damages it, like Mystic Shot or Get Excited, that will affect his ability. Say you are playing, your opponent is playing this guy and you have, I don't know, let's say you have Elise on the board, a 2 mana 2/3. This targets Elise. Also notice that this thing just says enemies, so you can target heroes. Champions, sorry. I played a lot of Dota. So let's say they do that and they target your Elise, and they're not deep and they're not even close to being deep, so let's take that out of the equation. Normally, nothing happening. Yeah, this guy's gonna kill Elise. No problem. But if you are, as the Elise player, say like you have a Vile Feast or something. And in response to this guy's play ability, you play Vile Feast. He becomes a 4/3, and then before the ability goes off, it checks his health, sees his health is at 3, and it checks Elise's health, and we're assuming Elise is full health, and sees Elise is also a 2/3. Nothing happens because their health is equal, and this guy will only obliterate the enemy if they have less health. So you can, in essence, counter the summon ability of this guy that way. Obviously, there's a lot of nuance that can go on. Like, you play your damage-based spell, your opponent plays a damage-based spell to try to get the ability to go off. Now, the one good thing I will say is that this is an obliterate ability, so that means things like death abilities aren't going off, so last words aren't going off. Things like Ladros, Commander Ladros, will not have his ability go off. So let's say you're deep, obviously, and your opponent plays Ladros, Commander Ladros. Commander Ladros is really annoying. However, Devourer kills Ladros cleanly. 7/7 when he's deep. Ladros is a 9/6. Obliterates Ladros. Ladros doesn't go back to your opponent's hand. And you have a 7/7 that can attack in. That's great. Now, the issue is, because of the situation I explained about how your opponent can just either bounce the guy, kill the guy, use a damage-based ability to, in essence, counter his effect, I feel like that does hold him back a little bit. So, while I love the card, I'm only going to give it 3 stars. It's a very powerful effect, don't get me wrong, but just a little difficult to actually go off. And even if it doesn't go off, it's a 4/4, which is not the worst you could have for 6 mana. Like, I'd rather be paying 3 to 4 mana for a 4/4. But you know, you got deep, so it's not always going to be a 4/4. So yeah, 3 stars. Good enough card, but I think you only played in Sea Monsters. Next up, though, we got Double Trouble. 3 mana, slow spell. It says, summon 2 random 1-cost followers from any faction. First of all, I think this is a freaking meme, but I think it's a slightly playable meme. Remember, there's a card called Professor Von Yip. I believe that's the name, about the guy who basically cares about you summoning 1-cost units. Followers, whatever you want to call them. And there are a lot of support cards for summoning 1-cost units and followers in the set. Do I think it's a real deck? No, in all honesty, I think it's still a meme, but it's a fun meme and it's a little more viable. Now, obviously, like, the randomness does hurt it a little bit. You never know what you'll get. Maybe you'll get something great like a Fleet Feather. Maybe you'll get something terrible like a Shadow Fiend. Who knows? So because of that, I think it is slightly playable. That's why I'm going to give it 1 star. If more and more and more support comes out for that Professor Von Yip 1-cost follower deck keeps coming up, maybe this card will be even better. Maybe it'll be playable, because it is fairly cheap. It's basically 2 cards in 1, because you're getting 2 units for 1 card. It's not terrible, but I still just really think it's a meme at the moment. Next up, though, we got Double Up. 6 mana fast spell. Deal 2 to an enemy unit, and if this kills it, deal 4 to the enemy nexus. I have no idea what deck wants this. 6 mana to deal 2 to a unit? That is not good, my dudes. Like, you look at this and then you look at Mystic Shot and you're like, wow, that's really not good. Now, of course, you're like, okay, you better be killing whatever you're targeting, and do you care about the 4 damage to the Nexus? I don't know. Maybe you're trying to plunder. If so, I feel like there's better ways to plunder than playing double up. I really just don't know what deck wants this. Like, is your removal in your deck so bad? Maybe. We haven't seen them yet, but they're maybe in a powder keg deck. But even then, I feel like I'd rather just play like other spells for a powder keg deck. Not really sure. Like, I feel like as a burn deck, first off, I'd feel like you would rather be in like Noxus and Piltover and Zon if you want to be in burn and aggro in general. So, don't really know who likes this. I still think it's good enough, and it just doesn't have a home. I'm giving it 2 stars. I feel like this card could go down in terms of its cost by 1 to 5 mana and then see play, because 6 mana is a lot of mana. So it's 2 stars. It's a kind of iffy card. I'm just like, eh. I'm not impressed by it, but I can see it. I can see a world where this could see play. Next up, though, we got Dreadway Deckhand. Speaking of powder kegs, I think this card is great. I think this is a super powerful card. 2 mana, 2/2. When I'm summoned, summon a powder keg. Powder kegs, as you can see, are 0 mana, 0/1s. They cannot attack or block, and they have vulnerable, so your opponents can basically challenge your powder keg to try and kill them. Powder kegs also stack, so if you play another deckhand, it won't take, the second powder keg won't take up another slot on your bench. It'll just go on top of the current powder keg you have, and it will basically just say you have 2 powder kegs. All your skills and spells deal 1 extra damage for each powder keg. So if you have 1, it'll do 1 extra. If you have 2, it'll do 2 extra. And then destroy this when your spell or skill damages enemies. Now notice it says skills, so that includes things like Commander Ladro's ability. Also, quick note, this works on drain effects like Grasp and Vile Feast. So let's say you have a powder keg and you grasp something. Grasp is normally deal 3, gain 3. With a powder keg out, it will be deal 4, gain 4. That's really good. Obviously. I am a big fan of these cards. Now, the problem is going to be with this card, sometimes you're going to have to be careful when you summon this card. You probably don't want to play your deckhand before your opponent does combat on their turn, because let's say you do, your opponent hasn't done combat, you play deckhand, then they play some random unit, and then they just kill your powder keg. In essence, you just played a 2 mana 2/2. You played Cythria for 2 mana. Like, sure, you got the powder keg and it basically pseudo blocked your opponent's unit, but that's not worth. You want to, I feel, if you're going to do something like that and play a powder keg before combat, you want to have some kind of cheap damage spell that activates your powder keg, like Vile Feast, or as we'll see later, Make It Rain. Still though, I think powder kegs are super, super good, and just getting an early powder keg out there really quickly, along with the 2/2 body to try and slow down aggro, is very powerful. In fact, I think this card is so good, I'm going to give this card 5 stars. I might be convinced to have this thing go down to 4 stars, because while I think the card is good, she's not completely OP and busted, like nerf her now good, but I still just think she's so good. She goes into so many different types of decks. That's why I'm giving her 5 stars. She's just so key. She does a lot. Anyway, love the card. Go try it out, and you'll love it too. Next up, though, we got Dreg Dredgers. Back to the sea monster decks. And even though he's not a sea monster himself, the Dreg Dredgers says a 1 mana 2/1. When he's summoned, toss 3. This is the first toss card I believe we have seen. Toss basically says toss is you discard the bottom X cards of your deck that are not champions. So in this case, when you summon your dredgers, they will discard the bottom 3 cards that are not champions. So don't worry, if you have like, I don't know, if you have a Hecarim on the bottom, they won't discard your Hecarim. So he'll be safe, which is actually very big for toss decks because of Nautilus, as we'll see later on in the video. I think the card is good. The issue is no one wants this card except for toss/sea monster deep decks. Now, granted, there are decks that are purely sea monsters that don't care about tossing, and there are decks that want to toss a lot without actually playing any sea monsters at all. I don't think those are good. I think if you're tossing, you should probably be playing sea monsters. Still though, I think the card is good enough. He comes down, he puts on a little bit of pressure. Maybe he'll block something and kill an early game drop like a Legion Rearguard or something. He does his job. He's fine. He's getting 2 stars from me. It's an okay card. He'll do his job. You won't be too impressed, but you're like, yeah, you did your job. You came down, you tossed 3. You did what you needed to do. Good enough. Next up, though, we got, I believe, our first champion. Yes, we do. We got Fizz. Fizz, if you've played League, you know he's a very annoying guy. Fizz is also annoying here, too. Fizz, there's a lot to unpack with this guy. Fizz is a 1-mana 2/1, and they say, when you cast a spell, give me elusive and stop all enemy spells and skills targeting me. That's really annoying. To level up Fizz, you have to have cast 6 spells this game. That's not that hard. And leveled up Fizz says, when you cast a spell, same thing. It's elusive, stomps all enemy spells and skills targeting me. But now, Nexus Strike, you get a CHUM the Waters. You get to create CHUM the Waters. And remember, CHUM the Waters is not that great of a card, as we've seen earlier, but it's still fine, especially when you're getting it for, in essence, free. And I'll be honest with you, I've never seen a Fizz level up because not too many people play Fizz because he's not that good at the moment. As for his champion spell, Playful Trickster, it's not that good of a combat trick in all honesty. 4 mana, remove an attacking ally from combat to rally. It's fine. Like, you probably don't want to actually play this spell in your deck, but if you draw a second Fizz, like, maybe you'll play it. Who knows? The issue, I think, with Fizz is Fizz decks sort of want to be aggressive, right? As you can tell from his package. If you've played Magic, you might be thinking of something like Boggles. Boggles are very annoying for people who come from a Magic background. The issue is, at the moment, if you're trying to be aggressive, it feels like it would be better to just play Dravenburn, Noxus, Piltover, and Zonburn. Noxus, Piltover, and Zonburn just kills your opponent much faster than a Fizz deck. And let's say you are the Fizz player and you go against the Noxus, Piltover, and Zonburn, the Dravenburn deck. You're kind of out of luck because they'll just kill you before you can do anything, and Fizz decks don't really gain life and kill things, and what's Fizz gonna do against Boom Crew rookie? Like, they'll just die. I'm sorry. So I still think Fizz is good as a card and playable. I think at the moment, though, he's not a good choice because he just needs a little more help, a little more support. In the future with more cards, I think Fizz will be really strong and really annoying. Also notice, though, that it says all enemy spells and skills targeting me. So if the skill is not targeting Fizz, you can't actually counter it. So think of things like Withering Wail, Ruination if you're seeing Fizz decks. Next up. Well, let's give Fizz some stars first. I think he's fine and playable. I just don't think he's good enough for the current meta. I feel like he needs a little more support. He's only getting 3 stars from me. I'm sorry, Fizz. I don't really like you, though. You're kind of annoying. Next up, though, I believe we have another champion. Yes, we do. And this guy, he's a little bit better than Fizz. We got Gangplank. Gangplank is a 5-mana, 5/5 Overwhelm. When he's summoned, you get a Powder Keg. That's pretty good. Now, that's not like that's not anything too flashy. But look at Demacia. Garen's just a 5-mana 5/5 regeneration. He's very well and good and playable. And this Gangplank's basically like Bilgewater's Demacia in terms of his card, 5-mana 5/5 Overwhelm instead of regeneration, which I'd kind of would rather have the regeneration in all honesty, but whatever. As far as leveling up Gangplank, you need to have damaged the enemy nexus in 5 rounds. Because of the way it's worded, Gangplank doesn't even have to be on the field. You can just be sitting in your deck similar to, say, like Yasuo. And leveled up Gangplank is really strong. It says when he's summoned, you still get the powder keg. But also at the round start, you get a powder keg too. So he'll just be keeping going and making more and more powder kegs. And his attack ability also works well with that. Deal 1 to all enemies and the enemy nexus. So you got a powder keg. Comes deal 2 to all enemies. That's just game winning right there. As for his champion spell, you got Parlay, 1-mana slow spell, deal 1 to anything. If this kills it, deal 1 to the enemy nexus. You know, works pretty well with his level up condition. Gangplank, solid card, blocks well, attacks well, powder kegs are great. Leveled up Gangplank is tough to deal with. Also, he's a pirate, so, you know, that's always a positive. I think Gangplank is really, really good. Nothing too special. Pretty much, I'd say on the same power level as Garen from Demacia. I keep making that comparison because 5-mana 5/5. I'm giving him 4 stars. Pretty good. Nothing too crazy about him, but, you know, sometimes you just want a 5-mana 5/5 with a little extra. And Gangplank does that. Now, next up, though, I believe we got a really bad card. Oh, yeah. It's pretty bad. In my honest opinion, probably the worst card from the set. We got Golden Narwhal. Beautiful art, though. But 3-mana 2/4 elusive vulnerable. I have no idea what deck wants this. Like, why? Like, you play it and maybe you can get in for 2 damage because it's elusive, but then your opponent just kills it because it has vulnerable. I'm not really seeing why you would put this in your deck and what deck would want this. Like, elusive decks aren't really playing Bilgewater in the first place. They're still in Ionia and Freljord. So, no idea. I don't even think this card is good for Expedition. Maybe, honestly, this card might even be worse than Bubble Bear. And Bubble Bear is pretty bad. It's like this and Bubble Bear are probably the 2 worst cards in the new set. Easy 0 stars. Now, however, we'll see this card again later in a couple of cards. So, just you wait. Next up, though, we got a good card. We got Hired Gun. First off, easy 5 stars for the waifu factor. She's a very, very cute card. 2-mana, 2/3. Hired Gun says, when I'm summoned, grant the strongest enemy vulnerable. I like this card a lot. Not just because she's a cute waifu. I like this card because, first off, the stat line is really good. I kind of would prefer her to be a 3/2 to be able to block Fearsome. But Fearsome's not too popular at the moment, thankfully. But I don't know, if you're against like an Elise or something, good luck. But that's when her vulnerable comes in. Again, the vulnerable will last forever, so even if they kill Hired Gun, that whatever had vulnerable is still going to have vulnerable, and you're going to have to probably, if you're the one who's been hit with a vulnerable, you'll probably lose your vulnerable creature eventually. I feel like she's just good. She's good in the early game. She hits like your opponent's early game stuff. You can use her to get rid of any problematic cards. You can't control what's getting vulnerable, obviously, because of the whole, it only hits the strongest enemy, but it's also good in the late game too. I think this card's great. Not too insanely good, but I feel like she's very, very strong. I'm going to give her 4 stars. Very powerful. Very good at what she does, which is just slows the board down, stalls a bit for the more dirtily decks. And I think she's like good in both aggro and control. Aggro not so much, because aggro decks would probably play things like Boom Crew Rookie and so on and so forth, but yeah, I still think she's fine. Next up though, we got Hunting Fleet. I told you we'd still see the Golden Narwhal again. Yeah. 5-mana, 7/7. That's good stats for the cost. When I'm summoned, summon a golden narwhal for your opponent. I don't really know what to do with this card. I feel like if you're in Bilgewater and you want something at 5 mana, just play Gangplank. Now, maybe you already have other champions you're playing, like, I don't know, maybe you're playing, we'll see them later, Twisted Fate and Misfortune, and you still want something in the 5 mana slot. I feel like it's an okay card to put in your deck, but it's not good. Like, your opponent's like, okay, I got a golden narwhal, it's not a great card, but thank you, I guess. Like, it will die to the hunting fleet, and you'll have a 7/5 still if you use the hunting fleet to kill the narwhal. Or you just, if you're the enemy, you use your narwhal to chump the golden fleet. And this thing doesn't have overwhelm or anything, so it's just going to be a big boy, like a big vanilla 5 mana 7/7. Maybe a Bilgewater aggro deck would like this as its top end, but even then, it's like, looking at aggro decks, they would rather have things that cost, I'd say like most aggro decks, when they start to get to the 5 mana range, all those cards that they're playing, they want to have them be finishers. Things like Decimate or Darius, in fact. So I'm not really seeing the playability of this card, but I can see like some niche decks, like some kind of Bilgewater aggro deck that might play this as a 1 or 2 of. So I'm going to give it 2 stars. The Narwhal is not too problematic to deal with. You can play this card, and then since the Narwhal has vulnerable, you can use like some small like 1 or 2 drop to basically like tie up the Narwhal and crack in for 7 damage, in theory. Still, though, I don't think the card's that good. Next up, though, we got Island Navigator. Now, speaking of good cards, here we go. 4 mana 2/4 Scout. I believe this is the first Scout card we've seen, too. Scout says, when you attack, if the cards that you attacked with all have Scout, rally after your combat phase. So this card's really good, even though she's a 4 mana 2/4. She also says when she's summoned, you get a random 1-cost unit from any faction, and it also gets Scout. That's really good. 2 bodies for the price of 1. Sure, she's understated, 4 mana 2/4. That's really, really bad stats for her cost. But the random 2/1, I'd say on average, you're getting like a 2/1-ish or so, 1/2, 2/1 or so. So that's like, she's like around a 4/5. I haven't actually done the math. Someone else out there has probably already done the math to see like what the average 1-drop is, but I would just estimate it's probably around like a 2/1. Maybe higher, maybe lower. I honestly don't know. So Scout is really good. It's the issue, I believe, right now, while I think this card is good, is that the premier Scout deck is also playing Demacia. And the problem is, if you're playing Demacia, you also want to play Bannerman. This card's not in Demacia, this card is Bilgewater, so you kind of have to really, really be careful with what you're putting into your Bannerman decks. Does this card make it into your Bannerman deck? Some people say yes, some people say no. If you asked me, I would say no. I would not want to put this in a Bannerman deck to lower my chances for Bannerman. I'd rather just play Misfortune alone or something else if I'm playing a Demacia Bilgewater Scout deck. Still, though, I think if you're not trying to do Bannerman stuff and you're trying to just do Scouts in general, and you can still play Bannerman in a deck that's running Navigator anyway. 6 non-Demacia cards doesn't terribly lower your odds for Bannerman hits, so it's still fine. Still, for that though, this card is really powerful. Scout's really annoying. Easy 5 stars from me. I really, really don't like this card, in all honesty. I don't like it as a player. I like the design of it, but as a player, I hate it because she's been beating me up a lot. So, next up, we got the Jagged Butcher. 1 mana 2/2, Plunder, grant me +1/+1. Not much to say about this card. The card's pretty good. It's Cythria, but instead of being an elite, as Plunder, get +1/+1. Cythria is a good card. Great in aggro, good in mid-range. Just get on the board early, start just getting some damage in. On turn 1, if you're playing this as your 1-drop, you're probably not activating Plunder unless something weird is going on. So it's just going to be a 1 mana 2/2. That's fine, in all honesty. And in the mid game, it's a 1 mana 3/3. That's also pretty good. I think this card is great. 4 stars. Not much to say about this guy. There's nothing too complex about him. Just pretty good early game drop that's okay in the mid game. So yeah, like I said, 4 stars. Now, next up, we got... Who do we have next? We got the Jagged Taskmaster. 3 mana 4/3. Plunder. Grant 1 cost allies everywhere. +1/+L. Now that means... Now like other everywhere cards, that means cards that are created, etc, etc. Cards that are just drawn from the deck, in your hand, literally everywhere. I think this card is fine. I hesitate to say fine. I don't think this is that good and constructed at the moment. I've seen some people trying it out with, like, I believe the card is called Daring Poro, the 1 mana 1/1 Poro with Elusive. It just feels a little too cute for me, obviously, like Professor Von Yip and other cards we've seen earlier that just summon random 1-cost units. But I don't know. I'm not impressed enough by this card. The card itself, by itself, is a 3 mana 4/3, which is fine, I'd say. You don't have to go crazy and go all in on just 1-cost allies, but it's, you know, it's not terrible. And like, if you are a 1-cost meme deck, you know, this hits Teemo, I guess. So Teemo becomes a 2/1. It's not, I mean, you don't really care about Teemo being like a 2/1 or a 1/1, really, so whatever. I do think this card is a little bit more playable than the other, like, 1-cost meme cards. I'm going to give it 2 stars. I feel like if we ever do see a 1-cost Von Yip or just a 1-cost ally deck, you'll probably see 3 Taskmasters in them. Most likely. Unless they don't want to play Bilgewater. Next up, though, well, speaking of 1-cost decks and 1-cost memes, we got Jailbreak. 1 mana slow spell. Summon a random 1-cost follower from any faction. The problem with this card is when we got, what was it called? Double Trouble, I believe? The 3-cost summon 2 1-cost followers from any faction? That was at least like 2 cards for the price of 1. This is just, you're paying 1 mana to get a 1 mana card, and you're basically rolling the dice and hoping it's okay. I really don't like this card. I feel like just play the 1 costs if they're good, and if you're like, I want something that's not in my region, I'm like, well, that probably sounds like you should be in that region then, or something. I don't know, like, yeah, there are good 1 costs. Like, if you're playing a 1-cost meme deck, you're probably in Bilgewater, Piltover, and Zon. And yes, Demacia has some good 1-cost allies, as do the other regions as well, like Shadow Isles has Hapless Aristocrat, etc, etc. The problem is there's some pretty bad 1-cost allies too, like Shadow Fiend. He kind of sucks. I mean, I guess he's an okay card to get from this because he hits hard, I guess, but eh. I think it is still playable in the memey 1-cost follower deck though, so 1 star. Very, very niche card, but not completely unplayable. Now, another sea monster card, a card I love. JAULL Hunters? I'm sorry if I'm butchering that. JAULL Hunters, 3 mana 4/1 challenger. When I'm summoned, create a random sea monster in hand. The pool of sea monsters is not that big. I believe there are, I want to say it's like 4 or 5 probably sea monsters off the top of my head in the game at the moment. And JAULL Hunters, I mean, the way I like to look at this card is a 3 mana 4/1 that basically says draw a card. And it has Challenger too. So in theory, you use this card, use Challenger to kill something, and then you're like, all right, I killed something, I stalled the game, I'm slow, I killed whatever is problematic that my opponent has. Now I got some late game with the random sea monster, even if it's one of the worst sea monsters. They're all pretty decent. The issue is the Hunters is a little fragile. 4/1, easy to kill, and it is a little slow. So I feel like it's a meta choice about how many Hunters you want in your sea monster deck. I've seen some non-sea monster players, sea monster decks, playing this card because it's just a 3 mana 4/1 with Challenger that basically draws a card. It's fine. I like it. 3 stars. I feel like it's one of these cards that sometimes a deck will want all 3 of them, and then in other metas it will want none of them. So yeah, I like it. One of my favorite cards of the new set. Next up though, we got Jettison. Back to the toss mechanic. Jettison is a 1-mana burst spell, toss 4. Nothing too complex here. You will play this card if you are playing a deep/toss deck, like a Maokai deck. We haven't seen him. We'll see him in the next video. The cute thing you can do with this card is, since it's a burst spell, obviously your opponent can't counter it or anything. If you are at, say, like 19 cards, 8 or less, obviously, but not deep yet, and you're attacking in with a deep card, like let's say you're attacking in with Abyssal Eye, and your opponent has, I don't know, Solitary Monk, the 4/3 elusive. They block your Abyssal Eye with their Solitary Monk, and you're like, oh, before damage, activate Jettison, toss the 4 cards, get deep. My Abyssal Eye is now a 6/6. So it can be used as a really janky combat trick. You still play these even as a non-combat trick, because getting deep as fast as possible is what sea monster decks want to do, and deep decks in general. And this is one of the best ways, fastest ways in general, just to do that. You'll like the card. It's not flashy. You're not gonna see your opponent play this and be like, oh darn, however will I recover as Jettison. I'd say it's still 3 cards though. It does what it does, and it does it really, really well. I know some people have been starting to cut these cards from their deck, at least cutting 1, because they're trying to make room for other stuff. I'm not sure if that's a mistake or not. I haven't played enough sea monsters myself. I played a little bit, but the issue with me is sea monsters is more big mid-range, and I'm more of a control player, so I have been mostly playing, in all honesty, like Ionia stuff. Next up though, we got another sea monster card. Now this is the card I like in sea monsters. Lure of the Depths, 3-mana burst spell, reduce the cost of sea monster allies everywhere by 1, and then draw a sea monster. Again, everywhere means even if you create the card, like off of JAULL Hunters. I have seen this card be super divisive in the community. On the one hand, I've seen people say this card is hyper trash and you should not play it, cut it out of your decks, don't play it at all, way too slow. And in the other camp, I see people saying, why would you cut this card? You need this card if you're playing sea monsters. You play all 3 of them. It's one of the biggest reasons to play sea monsters. I lean more toward the second option of, this is why I like to play sea monsters. Now again, I'm a greedy boy. I like my draw, I like my value. And I feel like this is a card that is a meta choice. I feel like in more aggressive metas, you don't want this card because it is a very expensive card. And sure, in theory, you're like, well, it's quote-unquote ramping you, and it cycles itself, kind of like Entreat. But even Entreat is considered a little slow, and that's 2 mana. So I really do think this is a good card. I really think it's going to come down to the meta at the time when you're deck building. So I'd say figure out what the meta is, and if you want to build a sea monster deck, decide, is the meta slow enough to run this? And then if it is or isn't, either run 0 or 3 or 2. I'd say at the moment I would run probably 2 in my sea monster decks, but that's because I like value and I like drawing cards and cycling cards and just greed in general. I'm gonna give this thing 2 stars actually. Mostly because of the, like what I said, meta choice, not really an auto include in my opinion, so 2 stars. Next up, we got Make It Rain. I've mentioned this a little bit in previous cards. This card is great. Like really, really good. First off, this card plus Powder Kegs, oh baby, that's great. Make It Rain is a 2-mana fast spell. Deal 1 to 3 different random enemies. Yes, randomness, obviously, you don't want randomness because it hurts. It can hit the Nexus too, so if your opponent has 3 units on the field, it sometimes will whiff 1. Like if they play Brood Awakening and they have the 2/1 spiders on the field and you play this, you're still going to hit 2 spiders at the very least, if that's all they have on the field. Still though, this card is great. First off, it's just so efficient. and it just does so much. And even if you hit face, it's not that terrible because that activates Plunder. Also, each of the hits counts as you targeting a single different enemy. Hello, Ezreal. So I feel like Make It Rain, in my opinion, is one of the reasons you want to be in Bilgewater. This card is great. Pretty much every Bilgewater deck, I think, wants this card. Maybe, like, aggro doesn't, but even then, I feel like aggro at least likes maybe one or two, but maybe not. I don't really know too much about Bilgewater aggro, if it even exists. That I don't really think it does, outside of, like, Demacia with a small splash for Bilgewater and Scout stuff. Anyway, though, because of all that, I'm giving this thing 5 stars. Such a versatile card, so good and efficient, so cheap, does a lot, works really good with powder kegs. Amazing card. And now we move on from an insanely good card at Make It Rain to what in essence is pretty much a meme here. We got MELD. 8 mana, slow spell. That already has me not interested. MELD says, this round, set all allies' power and health to the number of spells you've played this game. Again, that sounds bad. I don't really know what deck wants this. I guess like you can spam a lot of spells, maybe have a fizz on the board, get a big elusive fizz, and then maybe play some other cheap spells to like counter stuff that targets your fizz and other such things, but that sounds like a meme. So honestly, 0 stars for me. I think this is just too expensive and just not good enough for 8 mana. Like, I don't know, at 8 mana in terms of spells, you're in like the Ruination, Vengeance, Judgment realm. Like, look at those cards. Those cards are insanely good and super value, and you got this card. Again, this card is just a meme in my opinion. Sorry. Have fun with this card though. Like, this card will be really, really fun to try and play with and try to get it to work, but don't play this if you're trying to be serious and climb, in my opinion. Next up though, we got another champ. We got Miss Fortune. I've talked about her a bit. Favorite waifu of a lot of people from League of Legends, and she's also a good card. First off, the champ spell is Make It Rain, and we talked about that just a few minutes ago. That's already good alone. Miss Fortune herself is a 3 mana 3/3. She says when allies attack, deal 1 to battling enemies and the enemy nexus. That's really good. She doesn't have to attack herself for that to go off, so she can just sit on the bench, send in like a, I don't know, like a random just 1/1 body, like a spider or something, into attack to activate that ability. Since she's hitting the nexus, that activates Plunder. Kind of makes it hard to block. If your opponent's playing something like Brood Awakening, they're like, well, I had all these spiders and I was planning to use these to block, but now I can't block with them. I mean, you can still block to block the damage, but your spiders die and they don't actually do damage. It's kind of sad. As for her leveled up form, Miss Fortune, when she levels up, becomes a 3 mana 4/4 Overwhelm. To level her up, she must have seen you attack 4 times. I'll be honest with you, if you attack 4 times with Miss Fortune out, you're probably already winning. When she's leveled up, she says when allies attack, deal 1 3 times to battling enemies and the enemy nexus. I have seen her leveled up literally 0 times, and I played a lot of this game since the set came out. And honestly, it's because I feel like once people see Miss Fortune come out, they try their best to kill her right away, because even without her leveled up form, she's really strong. She's a really good card. She is one of the reasons why Demacia decks are splashing Bilgewater in their Bannerman decks. I'm giving her 4 stars only though, because honestly, like, she doesn't really have a level up form. She does, obviously, but it doesn't exist. You'll never see it. And second off, she doesn't really go into every single deck. You're not going to play her in like every single Bilgewater deck. She's very, very powerful, don't get me wrong, and you're probably going to play her and you're going to love her and she's going to crush your opponents, but yeah. 5 out of 5 though in terms of waifu-ness. Very cute. Poppy looks better though. Much cuter. Bring Poppy into the game, Marito. Next up, we got Monkey Idol. Now this thing, I don't know what to do with this thing. 3 mana, 0/4, immobile, so it can't attack or block. At the start of the round, deal 2 to it, and summon a Powder Monkey. The Powder Monkey, as you can see on the left, a 1 mana 2/1 ephemeral, says last breath, deal 1 to the enemy nexus. I mean, okay. What do you do with this? I feel like this card is just trash. I can't even like defend this card and say like, oh, maybe you, in this and this and with this and this, maybe it's okay. It's like, I guess if you can keep healing the idol over and over, you have an infinite supply of Powder Monkeys, but that doesn't sound too impressive. Like, I don't know, burn decks? This deck feels slow for burn. It doesn't really do well for control and creating blockers and stalling. I don't know. I really can't think of any deck that would like this effect and ability, so I'm honestly going to give this thing 0 stars. I'm sorry, Monkey Idol. I like the artwork of you, but whatever. That's the one good thing I have to say about you. Nice artwork. Nice glowy eyes. Next up, though, we got More Powder. Speaking of powder kegs. More Powder is a 2-mana slow spell. Summons 2 powder kegs. I'll be honest with you, when I first saw this card, I thought this card wasn't worth a slot in constructed decks. Turns out this card is a lot better. Just getting powder kegs is good because you combine it with cards like I said, Make It Rain, Withering Wail, Grasp. Very, very powerful. It's never going to be just a back-breaking play. You're going to play it. It's going to give you your powder. Your opponent's going to be like, oh no, I got to be careful now. So I'm only going to give it 3 stars. Like, it'll sit in the powder keg based control decks and it'll do its job, but it will never really be too scary. It will not be the card that people say like, this is the card we must nerf, this card is OP. But it'll just quietly sit in the deck and do its job. Next up though, we got Mystifying Magician, 4 mana, 2/2. When you play this guy, transforms an ally into a random 5-cost follower from any faction. 5-cost followers are usually pretty good. I don't know what the average is in terms of stats, but I feel like it would probably be like a little less than 5/5, probably around like 4.5 or something. That sounds pretty good. Like, you transform something that's like ephemeral or ethereal? Ephemeral? Whatever. I believe it's ephemeral. I can't believe I'm losing my brain here. I've been talking a lot, okay? Cut me some slack here. Or you just like, you also transform something small, like I don't know, like a coral creatures that you played early on. And then you got some big like 5/5 or something, like a guardian or something else. This card is fine, I feel. I think the issue is having something you actually want to transform, and the other issue is, in my opinion, if you're at an empty board, this guy is just a 4-mana 2/2. If you're at an empty board and you're playing this kind of card, you probably have bigger issues than, you know, playing a 4-mana 2/2. Also, I think the card is really powerful. Like I said, I just don't think any deck wants this ability yet. I feel like if you want this kind of ability, you want to be spamming the board. We've seen cards like this from Shaman and Hearthstone, and they have proven to be good, which is why I think, in my opinion, this card will be good in the right deck one day. For now, though, I don't think he's good enough, and I just don't think he has a deck he likes to be in. I'm still going to give him 2 stars, though, because I do think he will have a home eventually, and he might even have a home right now, and no one's found a deck that's good enough for him. Still, though, just 2 stars. Pretty good. Still, not good enough. Next up, we got a champion. We got probably, not my favorite, but one of my favorite champions from the new group of champions. We got Nautilus. He is a big boy, and he is a deep boy. Nautilus is a 7-mana 0/12. He is also tough and fearsome, and when he levels up, you get to copy the tossed allies that cost 4 or more into your deck. So you obviously are trying to get deep with this guy. So, you know, you're going and tossing a lot of cards, trying to get down to that 15 card count so you can play Nautilus and get a 7-mana 13/13, as you can see. Sure, you might play Nautilus before he's leveled up because sometimes you just need a 0-12 wall to try and slow down your enemy. It kind of sucks if you have to do that, but whatever, you gotta do what you gotta do. And then as you can see, Nautilus when he levels up, 7 mana, 13/13, tough, fearsome, and the sea monster allies cost 4 less. That's really good. Most people are able to get to deep, I would say around turn 7. So you probably are around deep around the time Nautilus comes out. So that's pretty nice. Like you play Nautilus. I'd say you'd want to wait until like turn 8 for Nautilus to wait until you can go like, okay, Nautilus on what's for 7 mana, and then using the discount you play a 1 mana sea monster. As for his champion spell kind of sucks in general, but in the right meta it's pretty good. It's Riptide. Nautilus is Riptide. 4 mana fast spell, stun an enemy, shuffle that enemy into the enemy deck if you have a Nautilus, and then obviously shuffle Nautilus into the deck. That's pretty good against something like Ladros, obviously. The problem is, like, you need Nautilus on the field. Now, if you're playing the champion version of this spell, then you obviously have Nautilus on the field, in which case, card's great. Now, the issue is, if you're playing... Nautilus only goes into, like, one deck, and that is basically deep/sea monster decks. And because of the lack of versatility, even though he's really powerful, also 13/13 for 7 mana. Hello, atrocity. But because of all of that, because of the lack of versatility, I'm only going to give Nautilus 3 stars. Powerful, but not versatile, I'd say. He's still really fun to play. Like, Nautilus decks and Sea Monster decks are really fun, and I'm not even a big mid-range fan. So go try them out if you have the resources spare. Next up, though, we got Parlay. We've already seen this card, Gangplank's champion spell, but this time without the Gangplank. 1 mana slow spell, deal 1 to anything. If this kills it, deal 1 to the enemy nexus. We talked about this a little with Gangplank. As for the card by itself, card's fine. When I first saw the card, it was one of those cards that's like, yeah, the effect's good, but is it worth a whole card slot in the deck? And the answer is yes, because the combination of things like Powder Kegs and Plunder make Parlay fine. And pretty much every deck is going to have an X1 at some point because of how combat works. You're going to find something to ping. And just a general ping is fine. Like, it's not great. You're not going to get amazing value. Like, you can't play this in response to something like, oh, your opponent's using a glimpse to kill a spider. You can't parlay in response. So that's kind of sad, but the card is fine and playable as is. I'm going to give it 2 stars, though, because it's nothing too special, and honestly, it could probably be replaced in the future with better cards. So just 2 stars. It's filler, it does its job, but it's not impressive. Next up, Petty Officer. Now, talking about the opposite of not impressive cards, I love Petty Officer. 3 mana, 3/1. When you play this guy, you get a choice. You get to either summon a Powder Keg or a random 1-cost ally from any faction. I love cards that give you choices and give you options. Now, granted, both of these options aren't too different. Like, most of the time, you're just going to get a Powder Keg, but sometimes you don't have a spell and you don't care about a Powder Keg. So it's like, all right, give me the random 1-cost and you'll get, like, a Fleet Feather or a Cytherea or whatever. That's great. Plus 3/1 lets him block. Fearsome, that's also nice. Little fragile in terms of the health. Be careful of things like Vile Feast and Withering Wail. Still, though, I really like this card. I think this card is really, really powerful. There's a lot of powerful cards from Bilgewater. Before someone says, like, I'm giving a lot of 5 stars, I'm also giving this guy 5 stars. Makes sense, there's a lot of powerful cards. You know, new region, kind of need some powerful cards. Thankfully, they didn't pull a Demon Hunter like Hearthstone did. Next up, though, we got Pick a Card. This is Twisted Fate's champion spell. We'll see Twisted Fate a little later on. Pick a Card is a 3 mana burst spell. It says, shuffle a card from your hand into your deck to draw 3 fleeting at next round start. This I like. I really, really am a big fan of this card. It's probably my inner control player coming out and being like, and bringing some bias to the table and being like, draw 3 cards for 3 mana. That's insane. Wow. Still though, you can do some cute stuff with this. Like, let's say you already have a fleeting card in your hand that you just don't want to play or can't play. Shuffle it back and would pick a card. Seems great, right? And the card is fine. You can use it to like go through your deck and cycle through your deck for like a Bilgewater Ezreal deck to really find more just targeting spells, or Ezreal himself, or just use it in some kind of more control-y deck just to get artificial card advantage. I don't even know if artificial is the right word. I was just going to think of a better word. Still though, card's great. Nothing too special though. The fleeting kind of makes it a little bit tough to use, I'd say. Like, you actually have to think. It's like, well, I have like, you'll be like, okay, I'll have like this much mana next turn, and I'll be drawing an extra 3 cards that are fleeting. Do I want to do it now? Do I want to wait? Etc. etc. So because of that and all of that stuff, I'm gonna give it only 3 stars. I went back and forth between 3 and 4 stars with this card. I feel like just the failure rate is high enough that I gave it only 3 stars, and that like it takes a lot of skill to use, if that makes sense. And you can always, and the randomness, obviously, from the inherent randomness of just drawing cards from a deck sometimes means you'll just screw yourself and be like, okay, I drew a lot of fleeting cards that I can't do anything with. Sucks for me. Or I drew a fleeting card that I don't want to play. I want to play later, like a Ladros or Ruination or Ezreal who hasn't leveled up, something like that. Anyway, though, card is still good, though. Don't get me wrong. It's a great card, and you should like it. Next up, though, what have we got? We got Pilfered Goods. Now, this I was talking about really early on when I was talking about Plunder. This card, I think, is one of the strongest cards from the new set. 2 mana, first spell. Draw a card from the enemy deck. Plunder, draw 1 more. Honestly, I think this is one of those cards that's like that's really quietly powerful right now. A lot of people are complaining about Demacia and how Demacia is really strong, which, don't get me wrong, I think Demacia is really strong too. But I feel like this card is just super good and super strong right now. And honestly, I could see this card getting nerfed in the future to 3 mana because it's just so easy to activate Plunder in Demacia, in Bilgewater, with things like Misfortune, Make It Rain, etc., etc. Because of this, like, this is going to just usually be 2 mana, draw 2 from your opponent's deck. And again, as I've said earlier, most Runeterra decks are running cards that are just good no matter what. Because of that, I give this thing an easy 5 stars. Now, obviously, I love draw spells as well, so a little bias there, but still, card is great. And very annoying to play against. Next up, though, we got Playful Trickster. It's Fizz's champion spell. 4 mana, fast spell. Remove an attacking ally from combat to rally. Yeah, this card is bad in my opinion. If you want this ability, just go into Demacia and play Relentless Pursuit. If you don't want to go into Demacia but you still want to rally, I would say just play the Citrus guy. 6 mana, 4/5. I believe he's a 4/5. So yeah, I don't really know what kind of deck would want this. It's getting, for me, 0 stars. I just don't think it's good enough for Constructed. Maybe as a one-of in a Fizz deck, or like a spell-based deck, but the issue is you have to remove an attacking ally. It has to be an attacking ally. It can't even be, you can't even like attack in, see how combat goes, and then remove an ally, or bounce an ally back. It has to be attacking, which kind of sucks, so a little hard to activate, a really expensive card. It's just meh. Next up, though, we got the Plunderer Poro. We got a whole new region. You know what that means. We got another 1 mana, 1/1 Poro. I'm sorry. Just like your friends, you're not that good, Plunder Poro. Please don't shoot me with your gun. 1 mana, 1/1 Plunder Poro. He says, Plunder, grant me 2 random keywords. I've said it before, I said it again. Don't play 1 mana 1/1s, and don't play Poros specifically, because Poros are bad at the moment. Poros got some more support this set, but not that much, and not enough in my opinion to make them work. Also, the randomness means that You don't really know what you're going to get. Sometimes you'll get like elusive, which will be great. Sometimes you'll get like tough, which kind of sucks. Sometimes you'll get, I don't know, regenerate, which also sucks for a 1-mana 1/1. Or overwhelm or fearsome or whatever. So yeah, not much to say about it. Don't play Poros. You probably shouldn't play 1-mana 1/1s unless they do something good. Or you have a game plan with them. He's getting 0 stars from me. I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry, my cute friend. 0 stars. Now, next up, we got Pocket Aces. 3 mana burst spell. When drawn, it costs 1 less the round. So it becomes a 2 mana card. What it does is it grants an ally +2/+1. 3 mana to give something +2/+1. That's a little expensive. Don't get me wrong. Which is why that has a whole when drawn costs 1 less, so it costs 2 mana. And even at 2 mana, it's still a little expensive. Now, when I first saw the card, I was like, yeah, that kind of sucks as a combat trick. Then I reread the card and I was like, oh, it says it's permanent. It's not a combat trick. It doesn't say until end of turn. It just will last forever. The card that you give +2/+1 will always have that +2/+1 unless your opponent does something, obviously. So because of that, I think the card is fine. Give like Fizz like +2/+1, and then Fizz becomes an actual real scary threat. Really beats down. Burst is nice because your opponent can't be like, oh, in response to Pocket Aces, I'll kill the unit before it can get +2/+1 using my Mystic Shot or something. So I think because of that, it's good and playable enough. 3 stars because you can use it as like a sort of combat trick. Like not only 1 health extra is not that good, but the permanent buff is nice, so I like it. And the on-draw mana cheapness and burst. Just a lot of small things here and there that give it 3 stars instead of 2 stars. Good enough. Play it. Go ahead. Next up, we got Pool Shark. 1 mana 1/2. When I'm summoned, draw 1 fleeting next round. So, you know, your next round starts, you draw your card for the turn like normal, and you draw a second card, and that second card has fleeting. At first, I thought this guy was insanely good because I was like, wow, I can play this guy, and then in my next round, I can draw an extra card. Problem is, kind of card that I want to play a early cheap blocker is probably playing a lot of expensive cards. So, you know, I'll play this guy and then I'll draw something expensive like Grasp or Ruination or Judgment or Back-to-Back or whatever. And it's like, whoops, looks like I can't play it. I still think this card is playable in the right deck. I just think it's going to be one of those cards that you need to think about and you just don't slam on turn 1 unless you are desperate because your opponent's like playing burn and you really, or aggro in general, and you really need to get on the board. And even if you lose the card you draw, it's fine because you got to get on the board. So I think the card is good. I went back and forth on my rating for this guy. I gave him 2 stars. This is one of those cards I would like to give a half star in all honesty. If I were to give half stars to 2.5. I bounced back and forth between 2 and 3. I settled on 2 because difficulty of play and just not that high of an impact card. Initially, I was thinking this guy was much, much better than I would initially, or I would come to realize. At first, I was like, this guy is insane, and I almost gave him 5 stars. And I started to play around a little bit with the guy, and just not that good, in all honesty. At least, in most decks. Ezreal decks like him, I guess. Next up, though, we got Growling Cutthroat. 1 mana, 1/1, elusive, fearsome. Nothing special here. I think this card is good enough for constructed play. I know I said don't play 1 mana 1/1s with our Poro friend unless they're good and you have a game plan. I don't think this card is good, but I do think she fits into a game plan. And that game plan is trying to level up something like Swain, Gangplank, Sejuani, or getting Plunder every turn. Thanks to Elusive Fearsome, she's kind of hard to block, in all honesty. Like, even if your opponent has elusives on the field, most elusives that are being played are fairly small. You know, Shadow Assassin, Kinku, Lifeblade. Make sure there's Solitary Monk, but whatever. So because of that, she's just a relatively good Plunderer activator and helps out some champions level up. I'm actually going to give her 2 stars because of this. Now, the issue is she kind of sucks in a top deck scenario where, like, okay, I need some gas in the late game. It's like turn like 7 or 8. Need something really good here, deck. And your deck's like, here's a 1-mana 1/1. It's like, oh, well, that's gonna be me dying. Thanks, deck. So yeah, 2 stars. She does what she does well. Plus, she's a 1-mana card, so you know, Professor Von Yip maybe? Question mark. Don't play Professor Von Yip, by the way. Next up, we got Razor Scale Hunter. 5 mana 4/4 scout. When you play this guy, you give an enemy vulnerable. You get to choose, I believe, who gets the vulnerable. This card is fine, I think. The issue is, I think the better scout decks all want to play Demacia. And the problem is, you don't want to go too high in terms of the number of non-Demacia decks or non-Demacia cards you're playing in your Demacia deck, because you want to play Bannerman, because that card is just busted even after it's nerfed. So let's say you're playing Demacia and you want to splash some Bilgewater in. You're probably splashing for Misfortune, I'd say. And maybe I would say like Island Navigator, and that's it. I don't think you want to splash for anything else. Maybe if you're trying to play Bilgewater Demacia Scouts without Bannerman, yes, this card can make it in and make the cut, because this card is actually really powerful, in my opinion. It's just not, it's not a Demacia card, and it kind of hurts Bannerman, and Bannerman's just busted. So, because of all that, 2 stars. A little small too for his cost. Like, I really think you need to be in the right deck for this guy. Yeah, Vulnerable's nice and all, but and Scout's pretty annoying, but 5 mana 4/4 is a little meh. I still think he's constructed playable and fine and good enough. But still, it's just like, whatever. Next up, though, we got Riptide. It's Nautilus champ spell. I feel like this is a card that I started really high on, and I have just fallen so low. Deep, if you will. Ha 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 ha. Streamer, please. Riptide is a 4-mana fast spell that says stun an enemy. That's it if you don't have Nautilus. If you do have a Nautilus on the field, you shuffle that enemy into, or that unit into the enemy deck. At that point, it becomes great. Think to yourself, like, wow, Vengeance is a 7-mana kill spell. This is sort of like Vengeance, but slightly better because it gets rid of things like Ladros. That sounds great. The problem is, you need a Nautilus on the field. I started when I first saw this card, I was playing all 3 of them in my Nautilus decks, and then eventually I went down to 0 because I was like, yeah, it's not good enough. It's not that it's not good enough, it's just, it's also slow too, is the other problem. It's like, a lot of time I was just playing as a 4-mana stun. 4-mana stun is really bad. So because of all that, I'm going to give this thing 1 star. I feel like this card is playable and constructed. It just depends on the meta. Like, you need the correct meta for this spell. If you're not playing the right meta, this spell, or if you're not in the right meta and you're playing the spell, it kind of sucks. And I don't think the meta we're currently in, full of things like Draven and Dravenbird and Demacia mid, is the right meta to play Riptide. Next up, though, we got another good card, or another card that's a favorite of mine, Riptide Rex. It's a freaking shark with a freaking cannon on its back, first off. That's already great. Shark man, I guess, technically. Riptide Rex is an 8-mana 7/4. He says, plunder, you get to cannon barrage 7 times on random enemies. Cannon barrage, as you can see, is on the left. It is an ability, or a skill, sorry, that says deal 2 to a unit. If it's dead or gone, deal 1 to the enemy nexus instead. That's crazy. You're probably clearing the board if you've activated Plunder with your cannon or your Riptide Rex. Now, the other good thing is, it's 7 different instances of cannon barrage. So you're pretty much filling up the board with all of your cannon barrages. So let's say your opponent's like, okay, I'll play deny. It's like, cool. You denied one cannon barrage. Have fun with the other 6. And plus you can do some, like, it's very fringe, but you can do some cute stuff by like filling up the queue of spells and abilities so your opponent can't actually cast anything, even if they have more spells. Like I said, very fringe, but it might come up every now and again. I'm not gonna give Riptide Rex too high of a rating. He's getting a high rating, but not too high because he's a 7/4 for 8 mana. He's a little on the skinnier side in terms of health, but because he's clearing the board, his small health doesn't really matter too much. So I'm still gonna give him a high rating. He's getting 4 stars from me. If he had like a little bit more life, a little bit more health, maybe he would be a 5 stars. Also, having to activate Plunder means like you're probably not playing him pre-combat unless you have like a damage-based spell like Make It Rain or something to hit the face. So, you know, that's the thing. So it's going to be tough to play Riptide Rex and Plunder and attack in all at the same time. But the card's great. Play the Shark Man with the freaking cannons on his back if you're in Bilgewater. You'll like him. Also, probably one of the best animations in the game right now for when his cannon barrage goes off. It's beautiful. Lots of cannons pop up and start shooting cannonballs everywhere. Now, next up we got Salvage. I like card draw. I just want to say that. I'm a little biased here. Salvage is a 4-mana burst spell. Toss 2, draw 2. So, if you're a deep deck and care about getting deep, that's getting you 4 more cards closer to deep. That's great. Even if you're not caring about deep and if you don't care about toss in general, it's still a 4-mana burst spell to draw 2, which is fine. That's okay. You'll probably play it just to refill your hand. You won't be happy if you're not caring about the toss, but you'll still play it because if you're like, I need card draw and the other region I'm in doesn't really have good enough card draw. So it's fine, like I said. Because of that, like, there's nothing too special, nothing flashy about this card. I'm giving it 4 stars, though. I really, really like it. Very versatile, goes in like a lot of decks, even if they don't care about the toss, because 4-mana draw 2. And at burst speed. Really sweet. Now, next up, though, we got Scrap Shot. 7 mana, fast spell, toss 3, deal 7. I've seen a lot of people say this is Vengeance for Bilgewater. First off, that's not true. This is not Vengeance. Vengeance is so much better. Now, granted, this thing does work with things like powder kegs, so that's cute. And the toss 3 sometimes matters if you're playing a deep deck and so on and so forth. But compared to Vengeance, this thing doesn't deal with things like barriers, so that kind of sucks. Again, also, like, 7 mana deal 7 is probably going to kill almost anything, though. Don't get me wrong, but there are a few cards that will actually survive a deal 7, like Nautilus. I honestly can't think of anything besides Nautilus off the top of my head that survives this. She Who Wanders, I guess. Maybe a big, like, They Who Endure. Probably could keep thinking of other stuff if I think too hard. Stuff with random buffs, like standalone buffs. And also, like I said, the whole barrier issue. Like, you play this and your opponent's like, oh, I don't want that to happen. Riposte. Prismatic Barrier. Still, though, if you want a big late-game kill spell and you're not playing Shadow Isles, this is not the worst choice you can pick, and it's an okay card to play. Like, it'll kill pretty much most things that your opponent is playing anyway, so it's still fine. I'm gonna give it 2 stars. I'd probably give it a higher star if you care about the toss as well, like you're playing sea monsters and deep as well. It probably goes up to 3 stars. I'd still only play like 1 or 2 of them at most, so just 2 stars from me. Now, next up, we got Shell Shocker. The Shell Shocker is, in my opinion, a really good card. 1 mana, 2/1, attune. So, refill spell mana by 1. So what you do is you curve out in a mid-range deck. You play Shell Shocker, some random 2-drop, and then a 3-drop, like Misfortune. Now, the issue with curving out like that is normally you wouldn't have any spell mana to play combat tricks. Thanks to Shell Shocker, you get some combat or some spell mana for combat tricks. Say like, I don't know, Ranger's Resolve, Elixir of Iron, etc., etc. I've seen some people play Shell Shocker in their Demacia mid deck so they can hold up Ranger's Resolve and Radiant Strikes. The issue is, this is a Bilgewater card, not Demacia. It kind of messes up your Bannerman. And plus it competes with Cythria, and some people are like, I don't like this guy because he has only 1 health and dies to Vile Feast and gets blocked by spiders. Not an elite for the elite synergy compared to Cythria. Still, I think this card is really powerful. Very good in mid-range decks. Comes down early, gives you some spell mana, lets you curve out with creatures and units without having to give up spell mana so you can play a 1-mana combat trick. Card's gonna get 2 stars from me though, because it just like, I feel like it's, the issue is not that it's a weak card, it's just that the 1-mana creature slot has so much competition. You're gonna need a really good combat trick for this guy to come up. And in the late game, he kind of sucks too, because it's like in the late game, you're like, I don't want to play a, what is in essence a 1-mana 2/1 that does nothing else, because you probably have so much spell mana if you're a mid-range deck in the late game. Anyway, though, next up, we got Sheriff Lariat Rose. Sheriff Lariat Rose is a 6-mana 6/5. When she is summoned, grant all enemies vulnerable. The problem is, 6 mana is a lot of mana. That's not a terrible ability to grant all enemies vulnerable, because it's a permanent effect. They'll always be vulnerable as long as they're alive. Probably. The issue is, for the same cost, go to Demacia, you get 6 mana Cythria. Compare this to Cythria. Cythria just feels so much more powerful. Still though, I think Sheriff Lariat Rose, I think she does an okay Cythria impersonation of just helping you get a good like combat phase, breaking through a nice mid-range stall fest and getting good trades in and just shoring up the game and winning the game for you. Probably players like a 1 or maybe even a 2 of in the Bilgewater mid-range deck you would try and craft, but I'd rather go even bigger and play something like Riptide Rex in all honesty. Still though, 2 stars for me. I think she's a meta call. And like a 6/5 for 6 is not terrible anyway, so she's fine. Next up though, we got a card that I love. Shipwreck Hoarder, another sea monster. In all honesty, I think the card is not that good, but it is a 7-mana 7/5 deep, so it becomes a 10/8 when you are deep. The Shipwreck Hoarder says, when I'm summoned, toss 2, and then shuffle 2 treasures into your deck. As we can see here on the left, there are 3 types of treasures. The treasures are the Keelbreaker, which is a 5-mana slow spell, deal 5 to all units. Treasure Trove, 5-mana slow spell, create 5 random cards in hand, they cost 0 and are fleeting. And then we got Plateworm Egg, which says 5 mana, summon 3 Vicious Plateworms, which are 5 mana 5/5s with Fearsome and Deep, so they become 5 mana 8/8s with Fearsome. The issue is, you gotta actually draw these troves. Now, of course, like if you're not reading this, they also, all the treasures say, sorry, did I say troves? I meant treasures. All the treasures say, if they're tossed, you get to draw it instead. So the cute thing is you somehow like get down to very few cards. You shuffle a lot of treasures in from your like 3 Shipwreck Hoarders or more. And then you start to play more toss cards like Jettison. And then it turns Jettison into like a 1-mana draw 4 because you just tossed only treasure troves. Or sorry, treasures. Now, of course, that's not always going to happen because of randomness, but it is kind of cute where it's like, oh, I'm going to play my Dregged Dredgers, the 1-mana 2/1 toss 3. Oh, look, I hit 2 treasures, so it became like a 1 mana 2/1 draw 2. That's pretty cool. So I like the card. I feel like this is a really greedy, really slow card. Very value oriented, very late game oriented. And also, because of the RNG with the treasures, sometimes you'll get like a treasure you don't want. Like sometimes you'll get Keelbreaker and you're playing against control and you're like, I'd love Late War Maker, I'd love Treasure Trove instead. Because of that, I'm going to give this guy 2 stars. I love the card. I really think he's meta dependent. You need a super slow meta for this guy to be fine and playable. But still, really fun card. I love playing him. Very greedy, very fun, very value. Play him. He's great. Long, snaky sea monster boy. Next up, we got Sleight of Hand. 3 mana slow spell, plunder, draw a random non-champion from the enemy hand. I am not a fan of this card. The problem is slow spell, so not burst, not even a fast spell. Your opponent's like, oh, okay, Sleight of Hand. I don't want you to steal my Mystic Shot, so I'll use Mystic Shot now to kill something and prevent you from stealing my Mystic Shot. Plus plunder, so they have to actually get some damage in on the face, which, while not too hard, it can get a little hard. And second off, it's not even really creating card advantage. You're like trading a card to get a random card. That's not great. Like, sure, if you have like the Black Market Merchant or something from earlier, sure, the card is a little cheaper, but also it's just not that good. Plus non-champion, so sometimes this can completely whiff, like your opponent has no hand first off, or they have a hand, but it's like all champions. Like, I don't know, you're playing against like Demacia, and they're like, yep, my hand's like a Fiora and 2 Garens or something. Nice 3 mana do nothing. I still think the card might be playable in the future if we get more like card stealing matters cards. So I'm gonna give this thing 1 star for now, because I really just don't think it's good. But maybe like Plunder Matters cards will come out too, and this card will get even better. For now in the current meta, don't think it's good enough for Constructed. Next up though, we got Slippery Wave Rider. 5 mana 4/4 elusive attune. Not much to say about this card. I don't think you should play this in Constructed. This card is pretty much for Expedition, in my opinion. The only reason you should see it in Constructed is if your opponent is bad and doesn't know what they're doing, and they're playing, pretty much in my honest opinion, a bad deck, or as a budget replacement for something else. I guess like if maybe like elusive matters becomes a thing, I guess it's okay. 5 mana 4/4 elusive. It's not terrible, but I'm gonna give it 0 stars in all honesty. Sorry, Wave Rider. You look so happy. I kind of feel bad doing that to you, but yeah, 0 stars. Next up, we got Slotbot. 3 mana 0/3. Round start. Grant me +0/+1 for each card you drew last round. Then shuffle your stats. Or its stats, his stats, my stats, whatever. Yeah, this card is also a meme. You never know what you're gonna get, so sometimes you'll get like perfect stats and just what you need. The issue is Slotbot could accidentally kill himself. Like, let's say you play him 3 mana 0/3. He becomes, at the round start, becomes a 0/4. Basically pulls the handle, rolls the dice, and he becomes a 4/0. And you're like, all right, I played a 3 mana 4/0. That just died. Okay. Not really what you're looking for in Constructed. No deck wants this, unless you're playing some memey like RNGesus deck. Even then, like, this card's not that good. Like, most Constructed decks in all card games want reliability and consistency. This is the exact opposite of that. You should only see this in Expedition decks, and if you see it in Constructed, either your opponent is a bad player or they're just memeing around and joking and playing a meme of a deck. So I'm gonna give it 0 stars as well. Sorry, Slotbot. Really cool, funny concept, but yeah, you're just not meant for Constructed. You're just a joke. Sorry. Next up though, we got Smooth Solo with 7 mana 3/4 elusive. First off, very cute girl. She says, plunder, reduce the cost of allies in your hand and deck by 2. I don't think this card is playable and Constructed at the moment. But when I saw this card, I was thinking to myself, hey, I remember this card from Hearthstone called Emperor Thaurissan, or Tharusian, or however you pronounce his name. The 6 mana 5/5. At the end of your turn, reduce the cost of all cards in your hand by 1. That card enabled you to do some combos that costed more than 10 mana. Which is why Thaurissan was good. And he was just a 6 mana 5/5, which is fine. The problem is Smooth Soloist, she's a 7 mana 3/4 elusive. That's some really bad stats for her cost, and elusive is whatever. Now, the whole reducing cost of allies in your hand and deck, doesn't even have to be your hand, does open up some cute wonky combos. Now, does that mean you should play her? Probably not, because like I said, 7 mana 3/4 is really bad, and if you're needing the discount, that means you're playing a lot of other expensive cards, which means your deck is centered around the soloist, and if you don't draw her, your deck kind of sucks. So yeah, I feel like she's okay in Expedition, but a meme in Constructed. Because of that, though, I'm going to give her 1 star because of the potential for some broken combo that relies on her. Still, though, in terms of waifuness, she is very cute. 5 stars out of 5 stars for that. In terms of actual constructed playability, only 1 star because I can see some like weird niche combo deck where you reduce some really expensive cards to do something busted. But I don't think that's reliable and consistent. So, 1 star. Next up, though, we got Strong Arm. 6 mana slow spell, Plunder. Place a follower in play into your hand. At first, I thought this card was really good. I don't think this card is as good. I still, like, this card I think is more of the Bilgewater Vengeance. Now, granted, it's slow, so you can't be like, oh, in response to your spell, I'll play Strong Arm, because it's a slow spell. Also, you got a Plunder, which, well, again, while Plunder's not too hard, especially in the Bilgewater faction, it's still asking you to do something, which sometimes you might not be able to Plunder when you want to. And that becomes this is just a 6 mana blank card then. Still, though, like, being able to steal a follower that's in play and put it in your hand, that's pretty good. Counters something like Commander Ladros. That's really nice. In the right meta, this card could easily see play as a 3-of. If this is needing to see play as a 3-of, though, that's meta sounds pretty awful, but still, it's a tool that exists if you need it. Because of that, I'm going to give it 2 stars. Fairly niche card. Maybe you play as a 1-of or 2-of in just wide open metas, and in the right meta, it's a 3-of. Next up, the Beast Below, another sea monster. 4 mana 4/4, deep, +3/+3, obviously. That's pretty much all he says, so insert 4 mana 7/7 joke here. That's all. It's just a 4 mana 4/4 who's deep. Beautiful art. I really like the art. Some of my favorite art from the new set. But the issue is, I do think he is constructed playable. A lot of people are going back and forth. They're like, some people are like, oh, he's fine in the right meta. Other people are saying he's just unplayable. I think he's playable in the right meta. If you just need to get on the board early on and contest the board as a sea monster player, because he's a 4 mana 4/4, which is not great, but not terrible, and he becomes a 4 mana 7/7, which is fine. So if your opponent doesn't deal with him, then they got a 7/7 to deal with. So fine, but yeah, not amazing. So 2 stars. Niche card that only goes in 1 deck, really, which is sea monsters, and even that is pretty much going to be a meta call in my opinion. So 2 stars. Next up, we got the Dreadway. The first of, I want to say, I think off the top of my head, it's 4 cards that are like these tutor cards that draw a champion. In this case, this is drawing Gangplank. Dreadway is a 9 mana 4/8 fearsome. When you play it, you get to draw Gangplank, and while you have this card, double all damage dealt by allies. That includes Ladros, by the way. I just want to say. So you play Dreadway, Dreadway somehow lives, and then next turn you play Ladros. So, you know, Ladros sees like your opponent's at 20, rounds down to 10, and then Dreadway goes into effect, basically doubling that 10 back up to 20. That's an OTK. Well, not really an OTK because it spent 2 turns to set up. But hey, Smooth Soloist activated twice to reduce Dreadway to 5, and then Ladros to 5, and you play this guy for 5, and then Ladros to 5? Wow, that's terrible. But, you know, like, it's janky, but I've seen some people try it, and it's like, if you don't kill Dreadway, that's scary. And it is a 4/8, 9 mana, 4/8 draw card, so it's not terrible. It's drawing Gangplank, too. The issue is out of the ship cards that are basically champion tutors, this and the Misfortune one I think are probably in the lower half, are the worst ones compared to the other two, which are, I believe, Sejuani and Swain Ship. Still though, I think this card might have potential, and it is a little scary. That ability is scary. The passive, the whole double all damage dealt by allies, that is scary. So I'm gonna give this thing 2 stars. It's still fine. Like, it's okay. Like, if you're playing Gangplank, the problem is I feel like if you're playing Gangplank, you'd probably rather play Riptide Rex as your big finisher instead of playing Dreadway, because your deck's not really centered around drawing and playing Gangplank. You're just playing Gangplank as pretty much a 5 mana 5/5 in all honesty. So yeah, 2 stars, whatever. Next up, we got the other ship. We got Misfortune Ship, the Siren. 7 mana 3/7 scout. Play it, draw Misfortune. It says when you're attacking, or when the Siren is attacking, all spells and skills deal 1 extra damage. That includes Misfortune's ability, of course. That's cute, but I really don't think this card is that good. I mean, Scout's nice, so it can, like, you can get multiple combat phases. 7 mana, it's much nicer than Dreadway because it's relatively cheaper, and drawing Misfortune is good, but I'm not too impressed by it. I don't think too many decks want this ability. Like, too many Misfortune decks want this ability. So I'm gonna give this thing 2 stars. It's okay. I feel like most Scout decks would have killed your opponent before you can even play this card, so whatever. Next up, we got one of my favorite cards and one of my favorite champions from the set. We got Twisted Fate. Twisted Fate is a 4 mana 2/2 quick attack. When you play him, you get to play a Destiny card. We will go over the Destiny cards in the next slide, next image, whatever you want to call it. To level up Twisted Fate, he needs to have seen you draw 8+ cards. Leveled up Twisted Fate is a 4 mana 3/3 quick attack and says, the first 3 times I see you play a card each round, I play a Destiny card. I believe it goes in the same order as it does in League of Legends, which is blue, red, gold. I might have that mixed up. It could be blue, gold, red, or blue, red, gold. I know it starts with blue, but whatever. I think it's blue, red, gold, though. Also, his champion spell is pick a card, as we've seen earlier. It's a good enough card. Works really well with Twisted Fate and his level up thing. I like this card. Really, really powerful. Let's take a quick look at the cards of Twisted Fate. We got the blue card, which is refill spell mana, draw 1, turns Twisted Fate into basically Shadow Assassin. Gold card, deal 2, stun the strongest enemy, and red card, deal 1 to all enemies and the enemy nexus, rip spiders, basically. All of these cards are good. Twisted Fate pretty much is going to be good against any kind of archetype. Against control, you just blue card. Against mid-range, you just gold card, maybe kill something or slow them down and stall. Red card helps you deal with aggro. And, you know, just pretty good. And I knew I put this in the right order as to how the level up works. So it does go blue, then gold, then red, I believe. I might have gotten the order mixed up. I don't know. Don't blame me if I'm wrong. Because of all that, like, I'm giving Twisted Fate 5 stars. Just really, really good. His stats are a little small, but quick attack is nice, I guess. And you're not really playing Twisted Fate because of the whole stat line. You're playing Twisted Fate because of the Destiny card. Also, at first, when I first saw Twisted Fate, I thought he was much worse. That was until I realized you got to choose which Destiny card you got to play when you play him. I thought it was going to be more Hearthstone-y and would be random, and it just chose whatever. It would just choose the card at random, but once I learned you could choose the card yourself, I was like, oh, this is insanely good. At the very, like, in a bad situation, he becomes a 4-mana 2/2 draw card. Pretty nice card. Play Twisted Fate, you'll love him. Next up, you got Warning Shot. Warning Shot is a 0 mana burst spell. Deal 1 to the enemy nexus. It's an easy, cheap way to activate Plunder that can't be countered. That's pretty much it. There's some cute things you can do with Fizz, since this is a 0 mana burst spell, so even if you're out of mana, you can use this as like a pseudo counter spell to protect Fizz and friends, but that's so niche. But this card has some constructed playability. You're still going to see a lot of this card, not because it's going to be that your opponent's playing it, but it'll be created from another card, which we'll see a little bit further on. I'm still going to give this card 1 star because I do think it's playable by itself in a constructed deck, in the right constructed deck. I just don't think it should be played too much. Next up, though, we got Ye Been Warned. 1 mana, slow spell. Give an enemy vulnerable this round. One of the few vulnerable effects that's temporary. If that enemy dies this round, draw a card. So, in theory, you play Ye Been Warned, and then you use some big unit to kill the small unit, and then you draw a card, and Ye Been Warned cycles through your deck. Now, obviously, that's assuming your opponent has nothing, like any kind of like combat trick like Riposte, or a kill spell like Vengeance. Or you can do the play, which is you cast Ye Been Warned, and then you use an actual kill spell, or just a kill spell based on damage, like Get Excited on the creature. You might be saying like, well, why am I playing Ye Been Warned then? Well, think of it this way. It targets enemies. Hello, Ezreal. You play Ye Been Warned, you play Mystic Shot, that's +2 to Ezreal level up, and it helps cycle through your deck, which is what Ezreal loves to do. Put in Twisted Fate in that Ezreal deck. You play blue cards, cycle through the deck. You play red cards, hold off aggro. Gold cards, hold off aggro in mid-range. Smile. Sounds good. Still, though, I think Ye Been Warned's a little too niche. I still think it has constructed playability. I'm giving it 2 stars, just because I've tried it in non-Ezreal decks, and I've been a little disappointed in that it's just like, it's fairly easy to deal with. Like, your opponent will be like, oh, you're going to use Ye Been Warned, I'll use a combat trick, I'll use a removal spell, blah de blah, whatever. And then I pretty much was like, okay, I played 1 mana, nothing. Because, like, I threw away a 1 mana card, and they used a combat trick to kill, or a combat trick to either save a unit, and kill my unit, or a kill spell to kill my unit. And I'm like, alright, it's like, I basically threw away a card, and they got a 2-for-1 combat spell, or combat trick to kill my unit. Their unit's still alive, and I lost a card from my hand. Still, though, I think the card is good enough, and really, really nice with Ezreal. I just don't think Ezreal decks like Bilgewater at the moment. I think they still like Karma better, and Ionia, because of other cards. We'll see when we talk about Ionia in the future. Next up, though, we got Yordle Grifter, also talking about Warning Shot again. This is why you're going to see Warning Shot in Constructed, because of the Yordle Grifter. 4 mana, 3/3. When I'm summoned, create a Warning Shot in hand. That alone is already, like, I'd say fringe playable at best. 4 mana, 3/3. Create a Warning Shot and put in your hand. That's already not terrible. He also has the extra text of Allegiance, draw 1 from the enemy deck. Now, compared to something like Bannerman, which is also an Allegiance card, this guy doesn't really need to get his Allegiance off. If Bannerman whiffs on Allegiance, well, that's just sad. If this guy whiffs on Allegiance, it's still sad because you played a 4 mana 3/3, but it's not terrible. And you basically are just playing this guy as a 4 mana 3/3 to basically get on the board, fight for board. Obviously, it's really nice if you get to draw the card, but you're pretty much playing him just to get the Warning Shot to activate Plunder. You know, you go wait till you get to 8 mana, play Warning Shot, slam Riptide Rex. Riptide Rex clears the board, and then attack in with Riptide Rex and whatever else you have. Win the game. Sounds good. Anyway, though, because of that, I'm giving him 3 stars. High ceiling if he gets to actually steal the card. But his floor is not too low because he's always going to give you the warning shot, and you pretty much care about the warning shot the most off. If you're not playing Plunder, though, I would say you're doing it wrong when you're playing this guy. You really need to play Plunder with this guy. Also, you got to kind of be a little careful if you're also playing Powder Kegs, because sometimes you will want to play a warning shot, but you don't want to actually play a warning shot and use up your Powder Kegs, so that's also a little thing, but whatever. You guys are smart enough to be able to sequence your cards in the right order. Next up, though, I believe it's our last card for today's video. We got Zap Sprayfin. Hello, Shadow Assassin. It's good to see you again. Zap Sprayfin is a 4-mana 2/2 elusive with a tune, so get 1 spell mana. He says, when he is summoned, draw a spell that costs 3 or less from your deck. Now, Zap is good, but Zap's no Shadow Assassin in my opinion. I honestly think Shadow Assassin's a little bit better, a little cheaper, goes through the entire deck in general, can give you literally anything. This only gives you spells, sometimes it even whiffs because you might be out of spells, in which case, if you're out of spells, that you're in probably a bigger problem. Still though, Zap is really, really good in my opinion. Because things that draw spells are good. It's crazy, I know. Cards that develop your board and draw you cards, that's crazy. Also, hello Ezreal. You play Ezreal, or you play this guy, you get like a Get Excited, you get a Mystic Shot, you get a Yeben Warned. Sounds great. Because of that, I'm actually going to give Zap a whole 4 stars. I think this thing is actually not a downgrade compared to Shadow Assassin. Like, sure, I said this thing, he's not as good as Shadow Assassin, but I don't think he is actually strictly worse. I feel like Zap is, to put it, a side grade. Like, sometimes, yes, you just want more spells because you're playing a Spells Matters deck. The only issue is 4 mana. I feel like they put Zap at 4 mana because they saw how good Shadow Assassin is and how heavily played Shadow Assassin is, and they're like, we don't want to have another Shadow Assassin, so just bump him up to 4 mana, give him that new attune mechanic. Boom, Zap was made. Anyway, though, that's going to be it. I've gone through all the new cards from Bilgewater. I'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow we will go over in part 2 all of the cards that are new from the other regions, all the regions in one video. This is a very long video. I hope you all enjoyed today's video though. 2 hours long. That is a very, very long video. I hope you all got some enjoyment from watching me bumble my way through trying to give out some ratings and say my opinions on some cards and be like, hey, this card is good, this card sucks, this card is amazing, this card is trash, whatever. So I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, I would love it if you could leave a like or a comment down below. If you guys want to keep up with any of my Runeterra content, sorry, English is hard, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, if you want to catch me actually playing some Runeterra, you can always go and check me out at my Twitch TV account, twitch.tv/Zenaton. I stream pretty much every single day, pretty much always playing Runeterra because the game is fun and I'm having a fun time with it. Again, like I said, that's going to be it for today, for today's video. I'll be back in the next video to bring you, like I said, my ratings for all the other cards from all the other regions, all in one video, because each other region only has about 10 cards, I'd say, in each region, so I can clump those up into one video. So thank you for watching part 1. I hope to see you in part 2 soon. Again, thank you all for watching the video I've created, and until I see you guys in the next video, bye!